What does it take to make workshops work? And how can we facilitate collaboration that sticks and leads to results? My name is Miriam Hadness, and with the Workshops Work podcast, I'm on the mission to find the magic ingredients that make workshops work. Today with me on the show is Jeroen Frumau, and we are exploring how to use design thinking methods and its mindset to unlock potential in areas that you might not even have considered to workshop. So stay tuned. And by the way, if you don't have pen and paper at hand to take your own notes, why don't you visit workshops.work and download my free one-page summary. And now, enjoy the show. Hello, Jeroen. Welcome to the show.
Hello. Thank you for having me.
Yes, I'm very curious to explore with you and to learn from you how we can use the method of design thinking and design sprints for areas that we haven't thought of before.
That's a big expectation. I hope I can meet your expectations. I'm trying to be modest, so let's start small today.
And I'm sure you can, because you made me so curious during our exploration call that I had to stop it right there to keep me as curious for this recording and to share it with the audience.
Well, that's nice to hear. So where do we start?
I always like to start with a simple and maybe sometimes difficult question. When did you start calling yourself a facilitator?
That's a good one, because my instant reaction would be, I never call myself a facilitator. But probably that's not true. But I think I've been a facilitator of change almost all my professional career already. So when I came out of university here in Eindhoven, the Netherlands, I joined Phillips Design. And from the very first beginning, I have been involved in helping the organization to improve from a process point of view, from a managerial point of view. And those different transformations that we went through needed to be facilitated. So it was not something that I made up. We had to follow the guidance of the Philips organization, where to go or how to prioritize our activities or how to drive our business model in a different direction. And I technically have always been facilitating that change. So maybe it goes even back to 1995, 1996, when I joined Phillips Design, that I started to become already a facilitator, and that came maybe a facilitator of change in that sense. So not in the notion of facilitating workshops, but more in the role that I took in that organization.
So where did you learn the skills that helped you to drive that change or to facilitate that change?
There's two questions in that question. So where to learn how to drive change? Learning by doing. Of course, I have an academic background, but I'm a mechanical engineer. And I always tell everybody, don't give me your car to repair, because probably you'll receive it back with more problems than before. So I wasn't really that type of a technical engineer that felt passionate about creating technical solutions. But I was always very intrigued about how organizations worked and how they could activate the different entities of an organization in order to develop a product or develop a communication campaign. And I was so fortunate to join Phillips Design in the very days that design thinking was upcoming. And we had the opportunity to really start proving that design and creativity could make a difference in a business space. And from that moment onwards, a lot of things started to happen. From being a corporate department fully sponsored by the board of directors, board of management of Philips, to them telling us, you have to become independent and a commercial entity to actually generate your own income within Philips and beyond. And all those changes needed to be facilitated. So the first 4 or 5 years, I did it more what I thought was right, and I followed what others were asking me to do. But I got curious about that, and I did the education at CEO in Utrecht, the Netherlands, which is about organizational design and business consultancy, where I learned a perspective of how to drive change and how to facilitate change from a consulting perspective. Again, another 10 years of learning by doing in and around Philips, how to do that in the best possible way, but feeling confident in doing that. Did my MBA in 2008, 2010 in that period, part-time. which gave me new instruments and new perspectives about how to make organizations succeed. And then you learn a lot again, speaking another language, being more confident. And I think that's important in facilitation as well. So in facilitating change, those were, let's say, the professional journeys. If you purely look at from a technical point of view, how to structure a meeting, how to structure a workshop, how to drive creativity. Really, I have to be honest, it's all learning by doing. So I haven't done any masterclass. I have not done any course on it. It's all self-made and learning by failing and making the next step forward in the next workshop or the opportunity.
What does failure mean to you in this context?
In this context means active learning. For me, of course, failing for the sake of failing is not what I'm trying to pursue, but I'm okay with making a mistake or being told that I should have done it differently or realize myself that it can be done differently to be more effective. So failing for me means not meeting your goals. But is that something negative? No. It's hard sometimes. It's very confronting because it means not a project next month because you failed to bring in a new client, for instance. That's a hard failure, which you feel directly in your pockets, in your wallet. But failure can also mean not achieving the goal of a workshop or of a journey that you do with a client and think next time, how am I going to do it better? So it's also a learning opportunity. It's more a learning opportunity than something negative.
Yeah, totally. As long as we have the opportunity to reflect on these failures and to really learn about it or from it.
Yeah, and unfortunately, we do not always have that time, or we don't always take enough time to learn from it because the next challenge is already there. So people that really take conscious time to reflect and to improve, I'm always jealous of, because that's a skill in itself, to take that active notion of what did I learn from this step and how can I do it better next time? I do not always take that step very explicitly. For me, it's more an ongoing learning and realizing that I can do things different. And then with the next opportunity occurring, you start doing it differently.
Yeah, and I think it's particularly difficult if you're running your own business to really take time for this post-mortem. It might be easier if you're within a corporate and leading a team or leading an entire project.
That's true, but I think it's equally vital. But I agree with you. It's harder to engage in such a notion because you have to do so many things at the same time. Definitely as an independent and an individual entrepreneur or running your own business alone. Yeah, it is about doing the bookkeeping as well as new client acquisition. And okay, you can learn from a project that you've done. But I also have to do my tax filings tomorrow or the day after. And there's a deadline. Late is late and means a penalty. So yeah, it's a balancing act.
Yeah. What have you learned from your time? And it's almost 20 years, if I calculated correctly, at leading the design process at Phillips for now your own company.
Yeah, maybe to correct, I started as a student. I did my final thesis graduating from the Eindhoven University at Phillips Design. And I joined them afterwards, so I stayed, so to say. So that was my first employer. And 18 years later, I left, being part of the management team of Phillips Design at that moment. What have I really learned is that I learned, let's say, the width of such a business unit. So from a simple business process or a tool in the design process to how to activate it from a commercial point of view, how to drive strategy, how to drive performance management. So I've seen all dimensions of a independent business, so to say, in this business unit. I had that opportunity. I have to be very honest. I think it was a fortunate opportunity that I have. I was able to create my own roles in this organization. Therefore, I could learn actively where I wanted to learn because I created a new role in the next stage of transformation, as we just talked about. So from that point of view, I've learned a lot about how to set up a business, how to drive strategy, and how to engage and motivate people in that whole context. From a more specific point of view, it has been, for me, the place where I learned about the beauty and the uniqueness of design thinking, creativity, and how to apply that in a business context. I was so fortunate to be in that organization that was being recognized throughout the world for introducing design thinking in the business. And that's a nice opportunity. And that in itself is a learning and an experience.
And to you, is design thinking rather a method, or is it a mindset that is introduced to a corporation?
I think in the end it is both. Mm-hmm. One cannot go without the other, because if you only have a great mindset, if you want to create impact, you need to start activating it. And then the question is how to do that in a smart and in a repetitive way, and not just in a one-off, one lucky shot. But that's the same with lean and agile and all these other frameworks. I think it is partly a mindset. So what do you want to drive? What are the starting points? What's the behavior you expect across the organization? That's for me the mindset part, sometimes even a cultural dimension it has. But there's always the question, and what are we going to do now? And of course, that can originate from the mindset. Mm-hmm. But I think more and more, if you can bring some methodology in it, or a structured approach, whether that is a 5-phased approach or a double diamond approach, or it is a combination of tools that help to bring in a user-centered perspective, for me, that's not so important, but that's where the method approach. So for me, method is, let's say, being able to repeat it more than once and therefore activate that mindset in a certain way. And again, here, doing that in a business-to-business context, thinking about a consumer product, you start applying probably different parts of a method than maybe in a business-to-business or in a service design context, or maybe even in policy making or in strategy development or in organizational design elements. You use different methods, but I think they're all based on the same mindset or principles that you would like to activate.
If I got you correctly, then since you left Phillips, that's what you shared in the exploration call, you started to apply the method of design thinking to various different topics. So you worked in the public sector to use it to be more integrative and more disabled people friendly. And recently you used it to recruitment processes.
Yeah, so design thinking for the sake of developing a product, let's say what industrial designers do, or if you think about designing branding solutions that packaging designers are doing, or brand strategists or communication strategists, that's where design thinking, I think, is applied in the most essential way already for the last 20, maybe even 30 years. That's where it has grown, that's where it has emerged. From designing to design thinking, and then back to designing, and the act, let's say the creative act there is also, let's say, groomed and matured by these type of design professionals. What I like about design thinking is that it's so focusing on stakeholders and on audiences, and trying to take them into a central position. When you think about these products, I think, why can you not apply that in different arenas, in a different industry context or a different working context? So I started to explore my curiosity there in the public sector. So how was the Dutch government and the Dutch public sector actually applying design thinking in their policy-making efforts? Mm-hmm. And what did you discover? Now, I was fortunate to do this with someone from within, inside the public sector, and they were only exploring that. Let's say for them, the only user perspective they could take was, let's say, citizens. Mm-hmm. And it makes lots of sense, and how to design for them solutions, or how should a policy look like on healthcare or on in public transportation. There's so much design challenges that you can embrace there, that the civil servants, as I sometimes call them, they just would reach out to a design agency and have them solve it. But you can also translate all those skills and capabilities and perspectives also in their day-to-day work. Do you understand the consumer, or in other words, do you understand the citizen, or do you understand the patient in this context? And that is very obvious for design agencies and design professionals and design consultants. But why can't you do that in your own work? Why can't a policymaker not take those perspectives of first exploring the context, framing the problem, framing it deeply, not just, we need a solution. No, what's the problem? And frame that. Explore directions and solutions, prototype them. Don't hesitate to test them out before you make a call for the next stage of your iteration. You can do that in the public sector as well. And that was intriguing me. That's 5 years ago. We wrote a short publication about it, which in the end was more a stimulus for people in the public sector to start thinking, I do this already. The only thing is, nobody calls it like that. And once you start recognizing that, you start embracing it in a different way. So there's one benefit we had, the recognition, the appreciation for it. And where it also helped us to give inspiration for what type of skill sets and capabilities do you then need to introduce into these public sector professionals, these policymakers.
So what kind of skill set and mentalities do you introduce?
The skill sets of creative thinking, and that sounds very obvious for us design professionals or design-related professionals, but being able to think out of the box and coming back in there, applying design thinking in your daily practices, that requires training. That's not just something you start doing. It's about the analytical skills, applying them in a creative way. It's about how to ideate and how to turn that into prototyping. Prototyping, for me, I think is a vital skill for designers in your thinking, as well as in your bringing your ideas alive.
And two questions come to my mind. One is to just reflect on what prototyping means to you. And the other one, the concept of openness to fail and fail forward. Because for me, also design thinking is all about this. Okay, we prototype, we realize it doesn't work. So how can we fail forward and go into the next iteration? Yeah. And this, maybe I'm ignorant, but seems something that at least the public sector is not known for. So what is your experience with that, and how can we change that or be more open to that?
It's hard to generalize, I think, because I've seen many good examples over the last couple of years as well, where, let's say, the prototyping mindset and the dare to fail in order to learn and to improve forward is also taking place now in the public sectors. Let's say, they create opportunities to prototype a certain policy, engage with the right audience, get the feedback. That's one. Or really, why not implement a bit of the policy already? And from there, actually learn actively before you really formalize it. I think there are examples enough nowadays. I think if you start searching for them.
And I wonder whether it's not the perception of risk that might get in the way. So when I try to put myself into the shoes of the policymakers, then prototyping a law or prototyping a new regulation can be very costly and can be very dangerous. So how do you define a prototype, and how would you do that? What would be your advice?
I think there are different levels of prototyping. So really early stage is, in my view, we have an idea how to bring that alive through storytelling, maybe through easy rapid visualization. And that could be storyboarding, that can be animations, that can be cartoons, that can be small movies that you make, sample advertisement about introducing a policy or a law, and see what the response is of the audience. To provoke people to respond. And it's like we do in the design sprints as well, that really early stage prototyping in order to provoke a reaction, a response, to say, hey, are we right with our assumptions? And if not, we have to change our assumptions instead of developing an high fidelity prototype and go to the level that you invest money really in prototyping. And I mean, substantial money. They say, well, if this prototype fails, we lost really part of our budget and there's no room to correct course anymore. So prototyping in the first stages is to bring it to a level that you get enough feedback to say, if we fail, we can still move forward, but move forward in the right direction. There's other level of prototyping where you say, okay, we're really sure that this is the right concept and it can potentially solve the problem or introduce a law or a policy that is impactful enough, like in healthcare or something like that. The only thing is, we need to understand how the audience is reacting in the first stage of deployment. So the first version is a kind of a prototype because you want to actively learn from it. The only thing is, you can't afford a strategic failure anymore.
Yeah.
But this is like in product development and in service development, like in industry. It's better to fail fast and improve from there than, or to fail early and to improve from there, than to fail late in the process and technically have wasted your innovation budget or your product development budget. You can't afford yourself a next iteration or a new failure in that sense. And I think in all sectors, that is probably the same. Maybe we could even apply it on our own personal lives. The only thing is, I think we are afraid to take that risk. To come back to your words.
Yeah, and maybe we would actually gain so much from it, because then it doesn't, if we stop considering the output as the goal of the sprint or of the process, but as an insight for the next iteration.
It's a provocative statement that you make over there, to use the output not as the goal. And I like that, because I think it's really afraid to already have an idea of what you want to get out of a journey, out of a process, or even out of a workshop. Because you're so biased to seeing that coming alive that probably all the unique elements that are happening during that journey get wasted, because you're so focused on the output. Mm-hmm. I can give a brief example. I was recently I was coaching a team remotely on delivering a design sprint in the most optimal way. Mm-hmm. And they had a great experience with their client. So it all in the end was a great experience. But when we started the whole coaching I was helping them to set up their workshops at distance, it was so focused on the desired outcome that I was really afraid that they would miss out on all the in-between steps and the learnings that they would get from there. I was so happy to hear later onwards that they said there were so many learning moments and new insights that were being created throughout the journey, that in the end, that became the total output, instead of those 3 concepts that they wanted to deliver after 2 weeks of workshops.
I love the example. And I would like to hear more about how you actually facilitated this journey. Also related to what you were saying earlier, that it would be nice to have more this design thinking mentality from within the public sector, that they don't necessarily need to hire a design agency, but then it's so easy to fall in love with your ideas that you are then biased in the testing of the prototype, that you always lead to false positives. So how can you help them to avoid that and to enjoy the journey?
Well, I don't know whether I'm the only person who can come here with the magic answer. I think it probably comes back to what we said in the beginning. It is about that mindset. It's not about the methodology. I'm afraid that if you want to design a workshop, or you want to organize a workshop, and you are very much focused on the methodology, that you forget about the huge potential that the mindset can provide you. So what I tried to do in this specific situation where I was coaching this team at distance, that was actually across the world. They were in Australia. So you can imagine it was
really distant.
So it was really a distance. But that also challenges me to do it in a certain way, that I had to inspire them about the potential of how to apply the design sprint approach, in this case, as a methodology for this client. But I continuously wanted to come back. It's not only about the methodology, it's about the huge potential that's hidden in the methodology. Mm-hmm. So it's about unlocking creativity. It's about inspiring the people to go wild, and it's not about where to do that in the agenda. Or this has to come before that. Sometimes that's important, because otherwise you miss out on the potential that's in there. So it's first, what you all know it's about working alone together. Mm-hmm. That working alone is important, because then you can together reflect on it, and you can bring in democracy of the process and things. That those principles are important. But if you, for instance, forget about bringing people out of their day-to-day reality into the workshop, so you say, let's start now with the process, but you forget about disconnecting them from all the stress and the frustration they were in the last 3.5 hours while working. Oh, yes. And now and you forget about that, you miss out the huge potential of having those people really focus on the workshop. So it's those facilitating skills about how to onboard them in the workshop by offboarding them out of the reality. And that was one of those insights that the team in Australia, in this case, realized, that if we would not have done that, they would still be focusing all the day-to-day stress that they had before they came into the workshop, all stressed. You first have to disconnect them in order to connect them to the new things. Those little things I try to coach them on more maybe than on the process itself.
Very nice. And it reminds me of the design thinking mindset that you mentioned, that it's about empathy and focusing on the participant and the human and where they are coming from. So you first need to empathize with where they're coming from, and that they need to be disconnected.
Yeah.
And I was wondering whether actually the fact that you were facilitating this project from the other side of the world might have even helped because you were in such different stages of the day, so in such different areas that you might have needed this kind of process of disconnect and reconnect and even to successfully connect with the group. Because I guess if you just woke up and you sip your morning coffee, you're in a totally different state of mind than your group that you're facilitating that actually already had an entire day behind them.
Yeah, but without going into too much detail about the client that I was supporting, but actually what happened in the week of the workshops, they had their workshops, and then an hour later we did a debriefing. So they went through they were in a heist of adrenaline at that moment. They were enthusiastic about the things that worked well. They were enthusiastic about the things they discovered. They were stressed about the things that didn't work. And in 24 hours from now, the next workshop was there. So it was 4 days in a row. And for me, it was 3:00 at night. For them, it was 5:00 in the afternoon after the workshop. So you can imagine the differences that were happening.
Yeah.
So at that moment, it is first listening and observing them carefully, how they were debriefing about the workshop and trying to then connect with the key topics that fitted the ambitions for the next day. So yeah, it is showing empathy at that moment for their reality that they're in, and me just briefly stepping out of bed for a few hours to coach them and go back to bed afterwards. Of course, puts a challenge on me. On the other hand, it's also an advantage. I could not be in those workshops. There was a conscious decision made by all of us together that I would not co-facilitate the real workshops, and it had nothing to do with distance, but purely that this gave me the opportunity to train them and to guide them in doing it, and then experience learning by doing. Because what's the opportunity now? It was not like me showing how to do it, learning by showing, but it was really about preparing them so that they were ready to do it and learn with them from their experiences, and then asking the right questions. And hopefully I could coach them, guide them, mentor them a little bit on the right next steps based on my experiences or the perspectives that I had. In the end, they enjoyed it a lot. But I think the distance has helped here. If it would be me here in Eindhoven, them in Amsterdam, I think in the same time zone, in the same reality, same cultural context as well, it would have been different. So maybe more impactful this time.
Interesting how the difference, how actually obstacles or inconveniences can or might enhance the experience. I think that's something that we also tend to forget, is what the difference in time zones and the different of context can actually bring to the workshop or bring to the group instead of separate it.
Huge challenges from a negative point of view, but also great opportunities from a content and a collaboration point of view. In that sense, maybe one small example, and maybe that's also a bridge to one of the things that I've done this summer with teenagers around the world. We had a group of teenagers sitting in Uganda, Kampala, Uganda, former refugees, and they were participating in a design sprint type of setting, remote collaboration sessions this summer in a virtual summer camp that I organized with peer facilitators from around the world. But without going now in that event, but what we noticed is that those kids were at so much distance in such a different context that they were able to bring perspectives in these workshops, which was the same workshop for all those children from all around the world, Europe, America, but also these kids from Kampala in this case. The huge context gap that there was between part of the group participants and these children from Kampala actually started to impact how these workshops were going and where they were going, and even the technical problems that they were experiencing of participating. Zoom collapsed again on them because the bandwidth was not enough. They were chatting on WhatsApp with us to stay connected and keep contributing, but via WhatsApp and things. It started to impact the other children and teenagers from a collaboration point of view. Hey, this is also today's world. We don't all have Wi-Fi that's stable or electricity and things like that. But content-wise, when they showed next day the pictures of where they were living, and this was a topic related to plastic pollution and the plastic pollution around them, which was their daily reality, actually started to really impact the whole journey, so to say.
Yeah. And it creates an entire different level of empathy then for the group. Just from a facilitate, without going too much off track, because I would like to hear more about the project and also how you applied the design sprints to other things. How did you deal with these challenges from a facilitation point of view, that you have such different accessibility? How can you still integrate instead of letting these challenges break the group?
I think there are a few capabilities that a good facilitator should have. And I'm not saying I have them, but I recognize them in good facilitators, and therefore I learn it. I think is you need to be able to troubleshoot on the spot. If you think you can plan everything and therefore it goes well, that's not true. You need to have the mindset things can go wrong, and what if it goes wrong, what are we doing? So sometimes you need to prepare alternative solutions, backup mechanisms. So if it's really a high impact workshop where you say we're working with a management team or a leadership team from an organization and the CEO only has 1.5 hours, what if the CEO cannot connect? Mm-hmm. In such a workshop, you have to think about this type of scenario. What if the CEO cannot connect? I don't care about anybody else, but what if the CEO cannot connect? Is there an alternative approach? Do we have the phone number of his assistant? Do we know how we can reach him alternative? That's the thing you can prepare. And even then, it can go wrong. In a more general workshop, more design type of sprints workshops that we have, you can prepare a lot, but you cannot prepare everything. Like the connectivity problems that we had with Uganda at that moment, it happened. And luckily, we were with a team of facilitators and someone jumped off the workshop and started to handle it behind the scenes and trying to get those kids back on board.
So how did you do? Through WhatsApp you mentioned? Or?
Yeah, the kids started to actually communicate via WhatsApp. So we asked them the questions that we were also asking the other kids live in the sessions, and they were responding in Zoom, and the kids were WhatsApping. And one of our co-facilitators started to type the content or their contributions on the mural board as if they were there. Mm. Sometimes they were chatting over WhatsApp live with the other kids in WhatsApp, so that you get then alternative mechanisms that you have to activate from a technology point of view.
And luckily, the new generation is better capable to multitask and to chat on different channels at the same time.
That's an advantage. So I think one of the things is firefighting, troubleshooting is a capability that a good facilitator or a team of facilitators should be able to mobilize at the moment it happens. Mm-hmm. Like I said, you cannot prepare everything. And it's also not a good investment to only focus on the things that can go wrong in a workshop. I think it becomes almost an implicit capability and a natural ability to anticipate on things that are going to happen. Also sound like, oh, the camera switches off. What's happening over there? Keep that in the back of your mind. Maybe something went wrong. In the end, maybe nothing is happening, but you need to have an eye for that. Definitely in these remote times where on-screen presence and participation is different than in-room participation on-site. Yeah. And things like that. But yeah, keep an eye. So I think firefighting, problem solving is an important capability to keep things going. And maybe one tip, I think, for people out there, that's why I think it's important, definitely in the virtual space, to have always a co-facilitator on board or someone that takes that role at least. It could be a participant, but someone that is also keeping an eye on, is the technology working while I'm explaining the process and things like that. Then I think workshops perform the best.
Yeah. And to also think along when something go bad. I remember I was in a workshop recently and we wanted to introduce Mural. So we had this beautiful board and suddenly the server went down. So Mural was inaccessible. Yeah. And it wasn't in our hand. And if I had facilitated this workshop, just me, would have never been able to think so quickly and then to fix in the back end to see what the problem is and to think of a new solution and to get the group on board. We ended up using the Zoom whiteboard.
Which nobody uses, only when there are problems elsewhere.
Exactly. Yeah. I think I never used the Zoom whiteboard before, so luckily it was straightforward.
Yeah, but I think, let's say, rapidly responding to these changing conditions helps. Some things cannot be solved. Mm. And I think a good facilitator will sense the moment when a situation cannot be solved anymore. And that can be a technical issue, by the way, but could also be a participant issue. Mm-hmm. Or an agenda issue that all at once starts surfacing as undesirable or too political or things like that. a good facilitator at a certain moment should be able to also understand when to stop.
And do you think this is a gut feeling, or could you maybe point at a few things that would signal to you, oh, this is a point of no return, we need to reschedule?
Well, I think when participants start to disengage, so if the conditions in the workshop start to escalate to such level that people are looking around in different ways, are making remarks that have nothing to do anymore with the topic that we are discussing, start ventilating frustration, I think then there's a moment to stop and to say, okay, let's take either a break now and reevaluate with two people what is the best next step given the circumstances that we are in, or say, before we start wasting everybody's time, I think it's better to reschedule this conversation or this part of the workshop for a later date. Let's agree to stop now and move on later. Because you don't want to waste your own time, nor the time of all the participants who probably have freed up their agenda, which sometimes is a frustrating part. But it's better to use their energy in the right way than waste it because you want to do the workshop now. Again, here, focus on the journey and the process and not only on the desired outcomes, because you will not get that desired outcome if you keep pushing forward on doing certain aspects.
And I think the desired outcome, it might be different between you and the participants. So I think also focusing on the desired outcome for the participants. So maybe you have the desired outcome from your client as a facilitator. You book this workshop and you want to force it to an end. Whereas for the participants, it might be more beneficial to actually take a moment, step back.
Yeah, and now you get also the dilemma of the entrepreneur, because if you are, let's say, a freelance facilitator or a single man band, let's say that project is your bread and butter. So postponing a workshop might also mean not being able to send the invoice now.
Yeah.
And that's a dilemma for the facilitator sometimes as well, because it is your job. It is your bread and butter. And you can say, well, I'm customer oriented first, and that's what you need to be. So if this is not in the interest of the customer, we'll stop.
Yeah.
But there are lots of facilitators in this world that if they stop a workshop, they can send the invoice. So it's also balancing that act sometimes, which is sometimes difficult so to make that honest call in the interest of the client and the project, because you also know, it's also delays my project and my contribution. But I think it is the most professional thing to do at that moment, to say, the goal of the workshop is this way we're not going to reach that goal or to deliver a desired outcome. And I don't mean as an output, but as an outcome, the impact you want to create. It's better to stop now. And that's probably a more rewarding decision than probably to push forward for the sake of your own gain only.
Absolutely. And I think this also has to do with the integrity of a facilitator, of being a facilitator, because at the end of the day, we're there for the group.
That's true. And luckily, I only know integral facilitators in my network.
Yeah.
Hi, this is Andrew. I'm a facilitator and head of customer success at Session Lab, the dynamic workshop planner tool. More than 30,000 facilitators, trainers, and coaches use our workshop planner tool and save time and effort in the design process. So, how do they do it? Our drag-and-drop agenda builder makes it easy to transform your ideas into high-quality workshops, and the timing of your agenda automatically updates when you make changes. You can collaborate in real time with your colleagues and easily share professional-looking printouts with your clients. And if you need inspiration, you can check out our library of more than 500 activities and exercises and simply drag the ones you need right into your workshop agenda. So check out Session Lab to save time and effort in your workshop design process. And now get your first 2 months of Session Lab Pro absolutely free at sessionlab.com/workshopswork.
Time is running, and I still have so many questions to ask you. I would love to at least spend a short moment on what you call the talent sprint, because at one point you mentioned that I think you enjoy the moment of going wild in a design sprint. That's the words you use, going wild, where the creativity is fired up. And when I think of recruitment and HR, maybe next to accounting, maybe that's the most unwild process I can think of. So I am intrigued by how you apply the design sprint to something as risk-averse and conservative as a recruitment process. And I would love to hear more about that.
Maybe if I can best explain it by explaining the experience I had myself by participating in the global virtual design sprint in April 2019, I think. So it was for me the first time that I experienced what design sprinting was about, because I wanted to learn about the design sprint. What is it? What is that methodology? Coming back to your first question, or one of your first questions, what is that methodology of the design sprint to activate a design thinking mindset? So I was curious, and I wanted to learn by doing it. Instead of reading a book or go to school or to a masterclass, I wanted to experience it. So I got in contact with Robert Scrope in America, and he was organizing this event. And I said, let's participate.
Yeah, he was on the podcast.
Great. Yeah. Good to hear. So after 2 evenings of participating in that 2 sessions, the first 2 days, and if I recall it well, they were facilitated by Sandy Lam at that moment, a well-experienced design sprint facilitator already then, still, by the way. I got that experience by having these people collaborate here, 7, 8 people that never met each other before, let's say then the 2 days that they started to work with. We started to really enjoy working together. We were creating impact together. We were making progress together. We were starting to ask each other questions that had nothing to do with the design sprint. So where are you working? Why are you happy there? And people start saying, well, actually, I'm not so happy. I'm looking for another job. So they started to unlock conversations because trust was being built at that moment in that group of people that actually only knew each other from working together at that moment. And that was for me a pivoting moment, because I am also doing recruiting, matchmaking in the freelance world. And I thought this is a great format to actually have people unlock their potential, unlock their conversations, show their skill sets on a live stage where we work together. What if we could really organize these type of formats as an alternative for job interviews? Why not just have people, when they're interested in a certain organization or in a certain industry or a certain theme in the industry, why not work on that together? And by doing that, really express your passions, your ambitions to your peers, participating in that. But many of those peers work somewhere. So they might actually see you maybe as a possible new colleague for a vacancy that they have there in the team. So you start talent scouting yourself by participating. But what if we bring it one level up? What if we have hiring organizations participate in here, or representation from hiring organizations? So a financial institution that has a large UX team and is looking for new colleagues over the coming months, the near future. And not only a UX designer, but maybe also a content strategist or a marketeer or a financial specialist, but driven by the same passion or the purpose. Bring them together, have them work on a design challenge that actually is inspiring enough to make your time or invest your time in. And we curate it in a certain way, curated by a design sprint type of journey. So you go to exploration, problem framing, ideation, you create a prototype together, you present the prototype towards real stakeholders. But in all those stages, you have to show different skill sets. And not everybody, you can take the stage when you feel confident in that part of the process. So I've seen people really shine on stage, pitching almost a concept to users that we brought in for user interviews. And they told us afterwards, this was the first time I did ever a pitch presentation. And if you saw it, so they really made themselves vulnerable. And it was actually recognized as a core skill of those people by some of the hiring managers that we had invited in that journey to play that role of, let's say, recruiter, hiring manager. What type of people are you looking for? That these people got all at once more confidence, and they saw other opportunities for themselves than always applying for a job where their engineering skills were being featured, or their UX skills, and not their communication skills or their selling skills were featured. So the idea with the talent sprint is really to create that safe haven for a certain period of time where you can perform together. By performing together, you get to know each other in a different way. You start to unlock different conversations, and those conversations could lead towards what are your career ambitions? Where do you see yourself in a certain period of time? And then connect it with job opportunities.
I think it's wonderful on so many levels because it, yes, for the recruitment process, which is also very often stopping at a superficial level, which cannot screen the candidates to a surface just because of a lack of time or lack of opportunity. And now I wondered, how do the recruitment or the hiring managers react to that? Because as you mentioned, it is a vulnerable process.
It's from both sides, by the way.
Exactly.
Not only from the candidate point of view.
Absolutely, but from the manager point of view.
But a hiring manager or one of his team members that are participating, they actually have to show themselves as individual, as a person, and not in a role, but as a person, as a peer participant. So it's not like they're sitting on the bench and watching the people perform virtually or in a real life situation. No, they are participant. And they are also asked to tell the others, why are you working at this company? What makes you get up in the morning and work for this brand or to contribute to the purpose? Because we unlock them, we try to provoke them a little bit in conversation. So we are staging different types of conversations. But we ask the same question to the people that have an interest of maybe joining this organization. What gets you up in the morning?
Yeah, so you have this difference in hierarchy and the difference in, you have a literal power difference in the room. And for me, and maybe I'm naive, but for me, one magic moment of a workshop or collaboration is to flatten the room in terms of hierarchy and that's power. So how do you do that in such a context where it's all about power at the end of the day, because one wants something that the other one has?
It's a very good question, Miriam. If you ask me what is the trick that we do, I wouldn't even know. But what we are doing, I don't know whether it's a trick, but what we are doing is approaching it on a real human level. Mm-hmm. So I'm not asking that hiring manager to tell a nice branding story, why this company is great and why he would like to have people join his team. I'm asking him what motivates him in life and how does he want to create impact. And that same question goes to that very vulnerable junior project manager that is interested to join this company. We asked him the same question. Mm. And it is an answer that is maybe different from a maturity point of view or from a career perspective point of view. It's the same question. It's the same vulnerability that they have to show. And that's what's appreciated so much. We put them in breakout sessions for 5-6 minutes with groups of 3, and they start conversations. And the feedback that we get is that even the hiring manager says, I started the onboarding with a future colleague that I haven't hired yet. So that means there is trust being built by putting people in an engagement model that is probably different than, can you tell me how in the past you solved a problem like this? Or what if? It's all test. It's all what if scenarios that you have to justify that you were the right candidate. So it's very one-sided. Mm-hmm. It's all about putting evidence on the table that you are the right hire for this company and that they take least risks by hiring you.
It's all about keeping the mask up instead of pulling it down and showing authentic human.
I think you say it. I cannot always say it, but I think the whole job application journey from a candidate point of view is a lot of fake performance because it's putting yourself in the best possible way on a piece of paper or in an interview or during a test assessment and things like that. So it's role playing to a large extent. You need to be the best candidate because you want them to hire you. And the interesting thing is with this format is that it also starts a little bit pivoting the other way around. It also starts a journey or a conversation or an experience where you have the opportunity to explore the other side, how the people of the organization that's participating are thinking.
Do I actually want to work for them?
And actually, you make the decision when you want to work for them instead of they make the decision whether they want to see you work for them. And of course, it's a two-way street. I'm not saying it's one or the other, but it is driving a more level play, I would say equal level play in the conversation, a more human level play. So it's not about a job, a vacancy, a hiring manager, a recruiter. No, it is person A, person B in the person they are and you have them engaged as human beings in a journey, and it's faking real life working together.
Yeah. It's funny. Once upon a time, I wrote a blog post about the similarities between a recruitment process and a dating process. And I think your process, you could perfectly also apply it to dating. Where I think working together on a joint challenge brings out the humanness and creativity and engages on a different level.
You can go to a restaurant and sit behind a glass of wine and have a conversation and what are your ambitions in life and have that conversation. Or you can say, why don't we do a charity challenge together and work for a long weekend together on helping children to have the best weekend at the farm or something like that, and get to know each other that way, and say, then after the weekend, do we still want to have dinner together?
Yeah. Dating design sprints. I can already see it.
I don't think I'm the right person for that product, but if someone is listening, I can really imagine that that could be a next application of the design sprint process.
Wonderful. We put your contacts in the show notes for potential spin-offs.
Yeah.
Before I give you the opportunity to tell us more about the 4B2M, what is your favorite exercise?
That's a nice one, because that's an exercise I almost embed in every workshop nowadays, whether it's the talent sprint, whether it's that For Better Tomorrow that we're going to talk about, or even in design sprint. And today we had a leadership program that we were facilitating, and there we did it again. It's kind of gift giving, as we call it. And it sounds easier than it is. It is quite complex, but what we do in different settings, in a different way, we ask people to tell a story. And a story could be as awkward as, or as simple as, if we would meet you in 5 years from now, who are we meeting? That could be a story. Or a more awkward story that we sometimes ask is, what is the untold story that everybody here in the room needs to know about you in order to really get to know you? You can imagine that's a more awkward story. Mm-hmm. But while the person is telling the story, we invite the listeners to start noting down what they hear in the story. So everybody can write down 2 or 3 post-its. What do I hear Miriam say now or tell now? So she tells, and she's passionate, and she puts everything in that story, because she has now 90 seconds or 120 seconds to present herself in a different way. Not like, oh, would you solve this problem? Or how do you look at this design? But more, what is that untold story about Miriam that everybody needs to know to really understand her? Mm-hmm. You got 120 seconds. But people start typing what they hear in the story. Mm-hmm. And what we then ask them, everybody, when the story is told, we asked everybody to write down one question that they have for this person. So the combination of those insights, as well as the questions, is what we call the gift. Mm-hmm. And we're not even going to present it. We're not even going to discuss it. It's what we hand over to the person that told the story. And sometimes you have 25 post-its and 15 questions. And you can imagine if you tell your story, and it's how it arrives on the other side. So it has 2 benefits. Are people listening? So you test listening skills. 2, can they conceptualize what they hear, or do they hear a deeper message? So do they really listen? Do they deeply listen to what's being told over there? But also, are they critical, or do they want to give feedback by asking a question that that person can benefit from? And we use that in the talent sprint somewhere in the journey, and everybody will experience that one way or the other. But we did it in the leadership program today as well with leaders in development. Mm-hmm. So present yourself in a certain way and give something back. It was smaller than this extensive, but we've also done it with teenagers. If we ask teenagers to introduce themselves, we ask the other teenagers, what do you hear? Who is this person?
And I also think that there's a huge gift for the participants who actually write down their observations, because in general, we hear what we want to hear. So we cannot, our brain and our listening and focus skills cannot grasp the entire entity of words that are thrown at us. So we select whatever resonates with us. So I can imagine that if the participants would go back and through the comments of noticing in the other stories, they would learn so much about themselves.
Also that, that's an interesting perspective. I never made that very explicit to then look back at all your own observations, because time is very limited sometimes. Yeah. But that's a very interesting one that we could explain. I want to say why we do this exercise, and let's say other versions of it, is that I feel that in talent acquisition or in job search or in career development or even in growing as a young individual, that feedback is really critical. Mm-hmm. And people that apply for jobs, they probably know as the best that very often you don't hear back, or the only thing you hear back is a no. But a no that has a context or that has feedback included in there, that's something that can be appreciated also if the job is not yours, because you know the job is not yours. You know already the no is arriving, but you want to know how you stood out. So one of the principles that I put in my workshops and definitely in these talent sprints is that feedback is a must. Everybody will always get feedback from the hiring side and from the applicant side. So it is to avoid almost receiving a no without a context.
Which leads us back to the beginning where you said that it's not about the outcome, but about the process. Yeah. If you make it about the outcome of being recruited or not, then yes, this entire thing might have been the waste of time. But if you make it about the feedback and the learnings along the journey, then it's an investment.
So I'll give you one example, and then let's go to the last chapter of this conversation. But we did a journey with a company in Latin America. You can also find the case study on the website if people are interested in it. But we had 12 people participating in the talent sprint, where also the recruiting team was there and the hiring manager was on top of that also there. So we had 14 people in total, I think, but we have 12 possible candidates for a few jobs. 2 people were hired after all. So they got the job. Mm-hmm. But what we experienced is that there was no competition during those 4 sessions that we had. Nobody was experiencing competition because it was not about the job. Mm-hmm. It was about working together, experiencing it together, connecting together. 2 other people are in the waiting room for a possible job in the future, but we know that the people are now connected on LinkedIn with each other. So it started to build a community as well. And those were people applying for the same jobs. So you would say in a normal reality, you're really angry if you don't get the job, but your neighbor got it, or your friend, and these people didn't know each other, but they started to build connections in this talent sprint, which is probably longer lasting than having the job or not having the job, because maybe a future job at this company can be mine because then the time is right.
Yeah.
So it's more about the job in the end. It's to really activate a job search approach or talent acquisition, which is not based on the resume, which is not driven by a vacancy, but is driven by the individuals and the opportunities that can occur out of that.
I think that's very inspiring. And although we're running out of time, tell us more how you apply this kind of same method or mindset or vision of design sprints to the For Better Tomorrow.
Yeah, I'll try to keep it short. Inspired by the global design sprint as organized by Robert Scrope, where he brings anonymous people together in an environment where they can experience creativity by using this methodology. That's one. By having worked with several remote facilitators in the network, in this case specifically Sabrina Görlich from Germany and Marcus Leer and a few more, we said, what can we do in this COVID period for the children during the summer holidays? So we were with the 5 of us. We thought, can we organize an event where they can experience something nice, doing something together? That's one. But where we actively connect them with children around the world. That's one. Where they can experience what creativity means as a skill, as a capability, and where they can start grooming, let's say, other skills that could be critical for the future, for their future. So we thought, why not organize a combination of, I should say, skill sessions, what we would like to teach them or inspire them by, like trust building, but also creative design thinking, also these type of sessions, or what is artificial intelligence. So they're more skill related and topic related. But on the other hand, have a red thread through those 2 weeks online working together, which was technically a design sprint. So with these children, 14 till 20 years old in that age range, actually bring them through a journey, facilitated, where they explore a challenge, define the problem, start ideating together, designing a possible solution, prototyping it, and presenting it to possible users. So they went through that whole design sprint journey. But it was not about the concepts again at the end. It was about that whole journey and experience different skill sets, strengthening your leadership skills, your facilitation skills by participating in that.
And building a network amongst the youth all over the world.
Yeah. So also by bringing and connecting
social capital.
Together. Yeah, social capital for them. So we had children from the Netherlands, from Germany, from I think it was Switzerland, one, from America, but also the 3-4 participants from Uganda, they were participating. So different cultures, different backgrounds. So it's a really rich melting pot, which we brought together. So it was content as inspiration. It was facilitation as a process, as a total journey. But it was also those connections and new connections. And this was all in August. So 2 weeks in August where we experimented this as a prototype because we wanted to learn how to organize this. This was relatively successful. So we got lots of feedback out of our networks. What's the next step? When are you going to organize this again? That we have decided, 4 of us, to continue that, but not only as a summer camp event, but more to create an ongoing platform where we say Generation Z type of representative. So we broadened the spectrum a little bit from 14 to 23 years old, where you have 3 types of audiences. The really young ones, keen on creating an impact on the world and tell me where I can do this and inspire them. And maybe also orient them, what would I like to do later? And we have the middle section, let's say 16 to 19 years old, that are doing a professional education or in let's say more foundational elements, let's say to prepare for their careers. And they are in the world learning how to do things and how to impact on the world and how to do that. What type of skills, capabilities, where do I see my career or my school going and my professional education. And the ones, let's say 19, 20, 21, 22, towards entering the working force. And their challenges is about where am I going to create impact on the world? So we have the ones that want to create impact, but have no idea how to do that. Then they have the ones that are investing their times in how to do that. And the ones that are entering the world, where am I going to now really create impact? And what we're using is, we use the World Sustainability Goals from the United Nations as a platform to develop design challenges and workshops. And actually what we want to offer them is a leadership development journey. So discover leadership skills very early on, guide them and inspire them how to then develop them, young at age as they are, apply them in workshops and apply them on design challenges and starting to create impact on elements that you feel is important. And finally, take leadership, if you're a little bit older in this audience type, in these groups, and inspire other kids and other young adults again by doing the things that you want to do as a community. And while doing this, you create a huge social capital with these people around the world, because we're going to do this around the world. Yeah. And we're going to do it for everybody and with everybody, because we want actually them design the workshops themselves, to define the themes themselves that are important to them. So we've kicked it off 2 weeks ago as an initiative. We're now going to organize weekly creative sessions for these, I sometimes still say children, but I should say young adult, Generation Z, what we call Ignite sessions. So they can just participate, and we have a theme for 3-4 weeks. And every Friday for 90 minutes, we do creative sessions together and they build something. But again, here, it's not about what is the output. It's what's happening in those sessions, the connections we create. They start discovering their skill sets, their strengths. And then we can start authoring with them their journey in the coming months to come. So that's what we are currently actually activating.
Beautiful. And I just wondered how you can then maybe open their results and their pitches to the world, to potential mentors, to potential recruiters, to potential investors.
So in the process,
bring it to the next level.
So in the process in itself, there's a lot of potential for, let's say, mentors, coaches, professionals to coach and guide and mentor these young adults on the topics that they want to be mentored on. That could be content, that can be on skill level, that can be on a journey. But later on, you actually start connecting this also with preparing your professional education. So then it becomes about choosing the right direction and coaching them in there, or finding peers in the network that have gone through that journey, or finding professionals that would like to coach people on making a school and educational choice, but more from how do I line myself up for success so that I can start impacting the world when I am through this education.
Or even a reverse mentoring model where these youngsters can actually mentor those who are in the positions where they're used to tell others what to do. And
the nice thing is that what you see is happening in these workshops, and what we saw in August as well, is that the thoughts, the ideas, the concepts that they come up with, they're not so far away from what the professionals, well-paid professionals in workshops that we facilitate are also coming up with. The kids are so free in thinking, and they see the world, the problems in the world in a total different way, that they formulate them in a different way, that they want to engage with them in a different way. And I think that's also interesting for the industry. The only thing what we don't want to do, we don't want to be an design research vehicle for the industry. It's not like we want to do product development for the industry, but we truly believe that having industry professionals, or from the public sector, or from other sectors in the world, engaging in a platform like this with these young adults that think differently in different stages of their life, that they can learn from it themselves as well. And they carry everything back in their own working life and their roles that they have in the industry. And therefore, it's that indirect influence that these kids can have. One of the ambitions that we have, just to line it up there as well, is that once a year we want to create an impact event, a kind of a virtual conference where all these events and all these initiatives that have happened in the period before, let's say 8 to 12 months, come together there on a stage, and we start presenting it to the world, towards each other, but also to the world.
Beautiful. Absolutely beautiful. I am looking forward to witness what there is to emerge. Please keep
I'm going to challenge you. I don't want you to witness it only. I want you to take a responsibility, and why not facilitate one of those journeys at a certain moment, or a workshop, or co-facilitate and experience it by doing it.
Absolutely, I'm up for it. And we have some witnesses in the audience.
Exactly, so it would be great.
Yeah, and if others feel inspired by this project, I will put all your contact details in the show notes so that they can reach out directly.
That would be great. That would be great.
To wrap it up, there's always one question that I ask at the very end. Imagine there was someone in the audience who fell asleep after minute 1, just woke up, and doesn't have time to listen to our entire conversation. What would you like them to take away?
I think in the end that the role of a facilitator, in whatever role it is to get the best out of people.
Yeah, nothing more to say.
Nothing more to say.
Thank you so much, Jeroen. It was a joy to have this conversation with you.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. And like I said, always very intrigued by having these type of conversations, see where it goes. So thank you for inviting me and having this opportunity.
Thank you for staying tuned and listening to the show. I appreciate your attention, as I know how busy you are. If you enjoyed it, please subscribe and engage by sharing your comments and thoughts, and visit workshops.work to download the one-page summary. I'm looking forward to seeing you back at the next episode, and I wish you a fruitful day.